I have to kind of stay with my camera off. So I'm trying to fix that. So let's call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. I'm Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shadid McNally, Chair of the Legislative Committee of the Colorado Forest Health Council. Thank you all for being here today. Today is July 14th, 2023, and we're here for a pretty important agenda as we finalize some of our recommendations to the full Forest Health Council. So with that, let's call this meeting to order and do roll call. Thank you.
Wednesday?
Thanks, Jody. I'm just going to roll down the roll real quick. Samantha Albert.
Present.
Christy Belton.
I'm present on my phone.
Great. Thanks, Christy. Pat Dorsey said she wasn't going to be able to make it. Director McCombs. Commissioner Jody Shadid.
He's just running a little bit late from his previous meeting.
Okay. Thanks, James.
Here, present. I don't know who has the background noise, but I hear someone else talking. Is there a way we can all mute just unless we're talking? And I don't know who it is. I can't tell, but thank you.
Unfortunately, the background noise is me. I don't know if someone else can take over roll. If it's pretty distracting.
646.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and do roll, and then we'll have you.
854.
Okay, and then I'll stay on mute.
It'll come up. 1,
Okay. Oh, it looks like it's also
6,
Mark.
854.
854.
6437.
Okay. I think it was Commissioner Jody Shadid McNally.
Present.
Okay. Mark Morgan. Okay. Well, I see Mr. Morgan there.
Yeah, Mr.
Julie
Morgan's present.
Stinsel.
Oh, by the way.
I see Julie there. And Sylvan White Skunk.
Your PIN.
So we do have quorum and we can go ahead.
2948.
I got it.
Great.
I know people reading my writing.
Courtney, do you have the ability to mute people? Okay. Okay. So with that, on to our agenda. Thank you all for being here today. We have put in a lot of work this year, and you guys have committed a lot of time to meeting almost every week lately. And I want to just thank you all for your commitment and focus and how much I appreciate it. And I know that we're a pretty tight consensus-driven group, so I want to just thank you all for your commitment to this committee and to the council. So with that, I'm looking for any additions, changes, or questions about the agenda. And I apologize, I'm going to stay off with my camera off just to help with no delay in my speaking, just so I don't create confusion for you all. So if you don't mind, I'll just keep my face off for this session. Thank you. Is there a motion? Any changes? I'll welcome a motion to approve the minutes for July 7th.
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. Christy.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Samantha. With any further discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any of those opposed? Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to go through our action item, a further discussion and vote on the legislative or administrative recommendations, and I'm sorry, there's a little space there, for the 2024 session and send to the full Forest Health Council for our meeting at the end of the month. So let's, Courtney or someone, could we go back and review the list that we've already kind of started? And then I forgot I was going to try to email you last night, Courtney. I don't know, or maybe you and Angela. I wanted to pull up the priority list and the list from oh, that's a great idea. From before, you know, we had a list of priorities that we had voted on from last year and some discussions in the full Forest Health Council. I just thought maybe it might be good to revisit that too. If you have that. And I apologize, I meant to kind of contact you earlier last night, but I was thinking about that this morning. Oh, there's, hello,
Yes.
Director McCombs.
Unless you know where it is.
Good morning.
Sorry, what was that, Angela?
Oh, I was just saying I can look for it if it's
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm sorry to throw
drop
you
in-
in. Yeah, sorry to throw you all a curveball, but I just thought maybe it'd be good to revisit that. Good morning, Director McCombs. Great to see you. I like the plant tree shirt. Pretty cool. So,
Going casual here in Crested Butte here this morning.
well, we're all pretty jealous. That's a beautiful spot to be in. So I'm going to keep, just so you know, I'm going to keep my camera off just because I'm having some internet issues. As you know, I live in probably the worst cell service, and not the worst, but one of the worst spots in the county. So, and who else has joined us today? I see someone else has joined us on the phone. Just so we can capture who's all here. I saw someone else join. Well, I'm sure you got that. So should we share the screen so we can, or show that, so we can look at it as we're talking about it?
Yes, I can go. So what I have pulled up is the themes that we've developed over this session, and Angela is looking for the priorities that the council created together for this year. Jody, do you want to look at the themes, or would you rather wait for the full council priorities?
Let's talk about what we've did last week, just to kind of refresh
Okay.
where we're at, just so we know what
Yeah.
we kind of refresh what we've already covered, because we covered a lot of ground last time. So.
Okay. So here is one of the administrative recommendations we made last week. The legislative committee asked the State Forest Service to convene a forum or meeting around adaptive silviculture, vapor pressure deficit, and how this impacts the future health of our forests, and what measures for mitigation actions we should consider. So that was one of the recommendations you all voted on last week. And the other recommendation is a little bit longer. The legislative committee wants to direct the State Forest Service, DFPC, and other agencies or stakeholders to convene an informational session to increase awareness and facilitate participation in prescribed fire policy development in Colorado. In particular, tribal voices and perspectives shall be included to raise awareness of historic tribal cultural practices and expertise in prescribed fire. Core issues to be addressed should include liability, smoke management, and resource capacity. The agencies will have 12 months from full Forest Health Council approval to convene. So those were the two recommendations that you voted on last week.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns about that, what we've already accomplished? And then did we added the other two to the list, correct? We voted to add the seed deficit, workforce, and the I forget what was the other one. I apologize, everyone. I thought we added the last part of the meeting, just those two other ones, just to add them to the list.
Oh, okay. I think I misunderstood. I thought we were adding them to the list to discuss at this meeting, not that they would end up on the recommendation list. So I have not pulled those yet, but I can look through the minutes and do that real quick.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I guess maybe I didn't see, maybe I should go back and look at those minutes again, make sure that was captured. Is that anyone else's recollection? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I thought we had approved to put those on.
I thought we were gonna discuss those also. It's Christie.
Okay, that's great.
I just read them, and I think that's how I remember them as well.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure,
this is-
go ahead.
So I just pulled from the meeting minutes that you said, Commissioner, seed collection and boots on the ground. Let's put this on the list for next week. Can I have a motion to put these items on the list for next week?
Awesome. Okay, great. Then let's move on to those items. And then we'll look at the other priority list, because I have some questions about that. So we've been talking about workforce issues and other capacity issues. And this came up for some of us during for me when I was planting trees, but also during their Forest Health Council tour. I don't know, I know some of us, we had that presentation from the Coalition for the Poudre Watershed. And so I'm curious about your thoughts about looking for some legislation to incentivize or provide some paid internships for this seed cleaner or seed collection, or how we help support seed collection in the region, or especially for Colorado, to help with the growing of trees, since we learned there's like a 70 million seed deficit across the country, and obviously we heard there's a deficit in our region. And I don't know if Director McCombs, I don't know if you were there for that presentation with the Coalition for Poudre Watershed, it's kind of all blurring together, but I don't know what your thoughts on with the nursery that you guys have growing. Is there a specific workforce pathway that could be incentivized or amplified, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, thanks, Commissioner. So just real quick context on sort of what's going on. So just for some awareness, there's a couple things happening around the reforestation pipeline. One is CFRI, the ERIs, the Ecological Restoration Institutes, are pulling together a discussion between the 4 Southwest states to talk about the reforestation pipeline. And we are CSU and New Mexico State are the 2 places where nursery capacity is being developed. And we're looking at the full, trying to look, this team is trying to look at the full need from seedling to planting to monitoring in the loop. So I just want you all to know that is coming together, and that's going to be pretty impactful in the way that we move out, being part of that coalition. And in the meantime, New Mexico and Colorado are developing a proposal for federal funding, because both the state legislatures in New Mexico and Colorado put sizable resources, and we're trying to leverage those with federal investments. It's very promising. Had some great discussions with the department, USDA, and others in the U.S. Forest Service. So just know that that's kind of moving forward. And then there has been some movement on, I think, the reforestation planning effort, in particular on the ARP, the Arapahoe Roosevelt Piney Grasslands. And so there is a lot of good momentum right now. As far as I don't know of any the specific needs. The one thing the capacity piece is, as far as like the human capital, is still a quandary. We're trying to fill that in the agency with internships, intern to hire. And then I'm also going to be working with the new Forestry and Rangeland Sciences Department chair to look at an urban and community and a reforestation pipeline for minors. So just those are just all the things that are going on. So how this committee would potentially address some policy formulation around reforestation in that pipeline is really, there is just a really clear need right now, because these conversations are just getting started. And
So
they're incentivized by the big investments from the legislature, from the feds under replant, and then from the legislature in New Mexico. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Director, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So the specific issue about seed deficit, that's all kind of embedded and part of that process. There's nothing we could do to try to incentivize that now.
I guess I just don't, off the top of, I think anytime that we bring policy focus and resources, that's going to incentivize action. I think there's a lot of work in front of us to identify where those seed sources are going to be, and then how we're going to collect them. One of the things we're looking at the nursery, if we can get into a long-term stewardship agreement with the feds to give us kind of a floor and resources on an annual basis, acknowledging the nursery is an enterprise unit, we're looking at seed orchards potentially, and some of these other things in a controlled environment. So, there could be some capital needs there over time, but as far as the specific asks, I'd have to kind of go back to some of the experts. Marin Chambers at CFRI is taking a lot of leadership in this space, and maybe kind of go back to that team. But that's what that conversation that CFRI is putting, the ERIs are putting together, is designed to define as where are these deficits and how do we start meeting them.
Okay.
So right. Unless anyone else has a bright idea, I might, Angela or Courtney, is there been discussions up to this point on seed sourcing and seed stock?
No.
And
The
Marin,
This is Mark.
Marin presented, sorry about that, but go ahead, Angela. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, sorry. The only thing I could think of is that if we've moved forward with this administrative recommendation around sort of climate adaptive silviculture, there could be a conversation folded in about that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, this is really reaching, but desperate times call for desperate actions. All right. There are workforces out there that we're already paying for from the state and the county. For example, is there a way to instead of picking up trash alongside the road, and is there a way to help harvest cones with a lot of these workforces for county jail time and stuff? I mean, I realize that it's a fairly technical thing, but if you had the supervision, could you get the labor that way? I mean, everything that we're struggling with right now, and almost everything that I see, nobody has the workforce. We have to develop the workforce, and I realize that a lot of these tasks, same way in our business, are fairly technical, but some of them we've had to adapt. You have to take people and select your best, make them supervisors, give them a big stick. And is there an additional workforce out there that we can harvest somehow? And I see people picking up trash and doing all kinds of activities in our community that are in orange jumpsuits. Is there any way to put any of the orange jumpsuits to work in solving any of your problems? That went over like a lead balloon, huh?
Well, I was thinking about those Swift crews that we have. Maybe when
I can
they're
chime
not-
in if
Go
it's
ahead,
helpful,
Angela.
just with some feasibility around the Swift cruise. So, so Mark, it's not a bad idea. It's a good idea. I think the challenge we face with corrections crews, at least at the Department of Corrections level, correctional industries, is that they are struggling with capacity themselves, but sort of for different reasons. So their external facing programs are, and the word's escaping me right now, but basically they're programs that allow folks to be out working in the field were severely curtailed last year because they had an escape from one project. It was not a COSWAP or SWIFT related project, but there's just a real focus on safety right now. And so unfortunately, they've really curtailed those programs. The Swift crews are now only operating out of a single facility in Canyon City. And so that really limits their ability to travel super far. Not limits, it just means it's really, really expensive because basically the farther they travel and if they stay overnight, you have to pay for multiple supervisors to be staying on site with them. You pay all their camping fees, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are some significant that even make the mitigation work that we pay them to do through COSWAP a real challenge. And until, well, and maybe this is the role of the council, but until state leadership is willing to, potentially sacrifice or accept a little bit more risk, with some of these corrections crews, they, at least on the forest management side, they're being kept sort of pretty close to home.
I was actually thinking more, I don't understand your system well enough, but I was actually thinking more along the community service. Could we get more to the county side of things or more local so we didn't have the transportation costs? Is there a way, instead of getting a community service where you were cleaning up the parks or doing trash, could you do community service pine cone collection? I think that might be a fairly positive or a popular, people have to want to do it. So, I mean, if you had a chance of scrubbing county toilets in the parks or doing community service to help harvest seed source, I just suggesting, I misled you, and I'm sorry, Angela. I wasn't thinking
not
of
at all.
actual
that's
correction
intriguing.
crews. I was thinking about the guys that got, they got umpteen number of hours of community service. I kind of know a little bit about that because sometimes I've even employed them, but we call it, some of these folks stay at the county bed and breakfast and then they do work release. That's all I was suggesting. If years ago, when I worked a lot on fires, some of the community service and stuff was to cook or run camps for fire suppression many years ago. And that was really popular duty and the guys competed for it really hard. Would you rather get additional jail time or would you rather be out in the woods? And they did a really fine job. And that's all I was suggesting. And then I don't think you're going to get your guys out. I agree with you. the trouble with getting folks out of Canyon City to do this work is probably not a real good plan, but I wondered if I always hear the words leveraging and cooperation and reaching across boundaries. Is there a way to tap into that county, either work release or community service pipeline? And that would be fairly localized. And then I'm pretty ignorant. I've been in this industry all my life, but I'm pretty ignorant about how you collect seed. Do you harvest the cones first and then sort the seed out of them? What is that process exactly, Director McCombs?
Depends on the species. I was gonna say it depends. And so seed extractors are sometimes part of the process. Sometimes we can just store a cone, but typically cone collection occurs and then seed extraction follows.
It occurs what? I didn't
So I
hear
know
you.
Julie,
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear your answer. I'm sorry. We're having a real bad time with sound here today, obviously.
No worries. Typically, yeah, cone collection is followed by seed extraction.
Okay. So I wondered if there was, I'm assuming you're looking for your cone collection. I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm assuming you're looking for specific sites for your cone collection that would be genetically positive. Is that so?
Correct.
All right. For example, we do a whole lot of whole tree chipping and a whole lot of whole tree grinding. I've got, I'm sure, no exaggeration, several million pine cones in my yard right now at my mill that we've collected, and these we don't have them sorted out, but I wondered if there was a way to do that. If when you had the right, if we were operating in the right area, could we make an effort to do that? To maybe how we harvest, to do some mechanical collection of cones or sorting them out. I think there might be a way to screen for that or something. I'd like to see that if this is a real problem, maybe we need to try to do something a little bit different than we've been doing. And when you say cone collection, I mean, I'm assuming people are running around picking up pine cones, or can we harvest those cones off of an existing timber sale where you've got all the timber on the ground and is that feasible?
I mean, this pipeline question is really the one that, again, we're just starting to get our arms around. We put a lot of energy and effort into the resources associated with the nursery modernize, and now we're in the early phases of building out a discussion of building out the complete pipeline from seed collection to seedling production to planting and monitoring.
Okay.
So I mean, if the sense of the group is that we want to advance some policy formulation around the reforestation pipeline, I think we could certainly have that conversation, but I don't know if we're going to have that hammered out in the time that we have left in advance of the interim committee. But it's absolutely an important and timely conversation. We just may not be in a position this year for some explicit policy to drive that at this point. I guess candidly, I'm not really prepared to give you any good ideas that I would be willing to. Well, I mean, that I would be willing to have success in implementing without some additional feedback from some of the experts that we're working with. A great presentation team and education actually would bring Marion in and have her talk about the reforestation pipeline and the work that CSU in New Mexico State is trying to spearhead. But Julie's happy with
paraphrase a classic line. We're from industry and we're here to help.
Yeah,
So we did have Maren in to come talk a little bit about that, and then we had Hallie. So, and Julie's had her hand up, but and I have an idea about an experience I had. So go ahead, Julie, and then I would like to share an idea after you. Thank you.
Sure, and actually, I think Mr. Morgan got to my thought when Angela was talking about the Swift Cruise. I was thinking more on the community service side myself. So I think they ultimately got there in the discussion. I was also wondering, you know, you got Boy Scouts, you got Girl Scouts, you got all these people who want to be out there doing things. Is there a way to use them to help sort of build the army of bodies you need? But it sounds like we're a little bit early before we get to that stage. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is as we enter through 2024, this sounds like something to keep an eye on. So when we're having this conversation in 2024, it sounds like we'll be at a point where we'll have enough information to bring that one forward the following year. So great discussion, super informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate your patience. I rode along with our park rangers last over 4th of July weekend, and just to see what it was like on a busy weekend. And one of the new rangers or seasonal rangers we have was on the Larimer County Conservation Corps that was out doing mitigation work. And she got so excited that she, you know, got hired on, and she's really still asking questions. And she remembered me from that co-swap project with Director Gibbs and Congressman Neguse. She was on that site at Lowry State Park, and she remembered me from that. We were having some conversations, and she said this sparked her career. So I don't know how are the capacity is that is though it's a program is already in place and they're already out planting trees in my area. If that's a capacity issue there, we could expand those conservation corps because they have that in place to kind of help expand those or help incentivize or have internships. I know Director McCombs, you've mentioned capacity, and there it seems like there's capacity issues in lots of different areas. And I think there was, that's why I want to bring up that old list. I think there's some old programs that maybe we're working that maybe we need to go back and see if we need to bring some policy to or resources to make sure that capacity keeps rolling, or these internships. I think if we get people hooked, for lack of a better word, or plant seeds in their lives to want to go forward on this, it's a great way to kind of have these folks get really interested in this career in this area and move forward. Julie, your hand's up.
Yeah, well, one of the thoughts you're sparking, and again, maybe this is just a thought for later, but as we're talking about capacity building, you know, what comes to my mind is when my time up in the mountains, you know, when working with the ski industry, you had thousands of employees who came in during the winter months, but when they were up there and during the summer seasons, they're looking for alternative work, alternative ways to stay busy. They're already housed, you know, in the mountain communities. They're already there, but they need sort of the seasonal work that is not winter seasonal work to do. And that may be a whole group of folks that could be looked at to solve, you know, issues in terms of having the people where you already need the people, and, you know, giving them some alternative thoughts. So, you know, when we get to that capacity piece on this, just a group to maybe have a further discussion about.
I would like to say one thing, Director McCombs. I wouldn't begin to tell you how to go about this, because I know when you're trying to run an organization or a business that flexibility is everything, and the opportunity to seize, literally seize opportunities and go with it. So I guess my interest here from this group standpoint is what resources could we try to provide legislatively for you to have ready. And when an opportunity opens up, you could seize those. I know how it is a lot of times to have somebody trying to help you, and they help you right into oblivion. And that's the last thing in this world that I want to do is make things worse. We'd like to, you know, you can be helped right out of business sometimes. And so I think I got into this backwards in the earlier conversation. What is it you need? Let's get the shopping list here. How can we really help?
I love these questions. So, the resources we have in place now are around sort of seed production, so seedling production, right? That the nursery is going to be modernized. We're building out our internship program to get a pipeline of foresters and other, natural resource management students. The deficits that we're going to hit is going to be in seed availability, and so there's going to be a natural challenge as we ramp up and as these resources from the federal and state side can start to flood in. So there is a need for seed collection, seed storage, and the associated genetic work that goes with that. That is a human-intensive, labor-intensive process. Historically, that work has been done primarily via contract, but we have an opportunity. We have some models here in the state that we continue to tweak around activating the Conservation Corps community in particular, and providing internship opportunities for students or other folks interested in getting into the business. So either of those resources, growing out the other piece of the reforestation pipeline puzzle will always, I think, work to our direction or work to our advantage. The problem is that we just haven't fully identified like the totality of that need, but in the short term, if the council would like to advance policy recommendation that would create resources, in particular for conservation crews or interns, I think those are places where we've had success in putting people into play. The alternative is then providing resources for the contracts that professional firms would bid for to go out and do some of that seed collection commercially as well. So we're going to have a heck of a lot better picture when the Southwest Reforestation Group that's coming together has some more time to dig into some of the barriers. But those are some things that we've had success with, putting resources to ground and making things happen, is activating the Conservation Corps network, and then of course leveraging any resources we have available via commercial.
Oh,
I am a willing pawn to support what you're trying to do. If I can get a checklist and marching orders, I think we're trying to get in the same place. And if I've got something, and what you're telling me is be patient, and you're going to come up with a plan. When you get the plan, formalize it as quickly as you can so that we can champion to get the effort done. And I think that's how you move things through this state around here.
Oh, you bet. I think this.
We're good. I'm good. Thank you.
Oh no, and I think it's fantastic, and we want to be responsive to the council's interests and will. That's really what it's designed to do. I just didn't come prepared today to be able to speak with complete understanding about what it is we need to build up this reforestation pipeline.
Can I jump in? I can't raise my hand. It's Christy.
You bet.
Okay. So
so
go ahead.
Yeah.
Am I okay?
yes, go
Okay.
ahead, Christy. Thank you.
Me being impatient and not very tolerant of how long it takes for things to get done legislatively, I am wondering if it's worthwhile to formulate some sort of loose language, because the seed issue seems like a big one to me. And if we wait another year before we advance anything, that's just time that we've lost for something that seems like a huge deal. And I'm wondering, can I turn up the pressure? Director McComb, I don't want to do that to you either. And like Mark said, over help, but does it help if we try to pull something together quickly for the Forest Health Council meeting? And even if it is just loose language, to get on the radar so that maybe we can develop or push something along to help you this year instead of next.
Absolutely. The cool thing about stakeholder-driven processes is that agencies are going to typically be responsive, especially if legislation is formulated based on your ambition. So if there was loose language, right, to direct the State Forest Service in partnership with whomever to identify the needs associated with the totality of the reforestation pipeline, we could do that. And we could bring forward those recommendations and that need at the direction of this council, and that would likely be the basis for some potential policy formulation. Like like I said, luckily those conversations are already starting, and that process is moving forward. We'll have that first conversation in early August. If this group wants to push this to the forefront, we certainly aren't, I don't think, going to push back, because we're going to be doing the work either way. Some additional resources to move things a little bit faster will certainly help.
Okay, as long as it's helpful and not a hindrance to you.
Again, these administrative sort of direction, this concept that's coming forward is, I'm just new in the job, so I don't know if this is how advisory bodies have always functioned, but it's good to get a sense of the group, because that's getting a sense to some degree of the broad stakeholder base. And if these are the things that are most important that we should be focusing on, then we want to be responsive. And we are, like I said, the reforestation pipeline is a core function, or excuse me, a core focus for us already. So we could be directed to yard up the resources needed and report back, and that could again be the basis for potential policy. But I'm looking.
Can I jump in here?
Because you keep smirking, and I'm not totally sure what it's about.
Can I jump in and just try and describe, I think, the sort of 3 avenues that are options here?
Yes, please, Angela. I'm sorry, if I didn't see your hand, I apologize.
No, I didn't put it up. I should. Okay, so Director McCombs, I think I hear you talking about an administrative directive to, as you said, yard up the resources needed on the seed side. I think, Christy, I maybe hear you asking about, and Mark, perhaps, could you make a legislative recommendation on the seed issue, whether that is an appropriation to the State Forest Service to, and I don't know what it is, but to develop a program to increase capacity around seed collection potentially. And then what's sort of the third avenue I think I'm hearing? Maybe it's just those 2, but yeah, I think I'm curious what folks are thinking, like administrative directive versus a legislative priority.
So I'm going to throw a big,
I think the third option is a study bill. Dr. McCombs, I sort of heard you alluding to this a bit. You could have a legislative recommendation with some funding potentially attached to do a study on the seed source needs.
and so that's kind of where I was going. I was going to actually suggest kind of throwing a curveball here, and maybe I'm stretching it, because I hear Christy and Mark, and I also feeling the urgency of trying to do something now, and it takes a while to get funding or internships. So how about all of the above? How about we do some legislative policy to help support Director McCombs with like a study or his work, and then also give kind of administrative direction to support the work that they're already doing, kind of like putting, I want to say pressure, amplifying or coming behind and supporting what you're doing already. But if we go ahead and maybe make a legislative policy for another workforce internship for this, for like a reforestry restoration pipeline, so that when they come out of this at the end, the program's already in place and the money's already there for the internships, so they don't have to wait for a whole nother year to see if they can get and make it kind of broad, so that it sounds like it's capacity. So if we create kind of what we did without to have kind of this capacity building, and have, it sounds like paid internships or incentives for these folks, or even the Conservation Corps, and we craft it in such a way to give it a little bit of flexibility. I wonder if it's all of the above. And I know that's kind of a stretch, but I'm wondering if so that when they come out of this study, because I don't think it's going to, or this work that you're doing, Director McCombs, I don't believe you're going to take up several years to do this, I'm assuming, so that when you come out of that period, the program or the funding or the internships are there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Could I jump in here for a minute?
Certainly, Mr. Morgan.
Unless I miss my guess, I think Director McCombs is a pretty busy guy, and we've tasked him with a lot of things, and the state has tasked him with a lot of things. And I think the ramp up over there, from what I've seen, has been pretty steep curve. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but I think maybe you've been drinking from the fire hose a little bit here. And I want to do this. I want to get this done. If it helps you get to where you need to go. And I guess my interest in this is we can act as a group. I guess my feeling is when I see things going in the right direction and I see someone being effective, I want their shopping list on more than one item so that we can combine some of these, put them together and get them moving down the road. And in my business anymore, and at my age, I'm physically unable to do a lot of manual labor or do a lot of work. But what my job is a facilitator. I round up the resources and the parts, and I get people to get the work done. They have to do the work, but I have to make it possible for them to do the work. And I see this group as much the same. We're dealing with agencies and a variety of groups, and we need to be facilitators. And I don't want to make work in doing this. I want to streamline work, and I want to put resources out there to get that work done. And that's how I guess I see my side of this from industry. How can we help you be successful? And I think we need to get feedback from you when you're telling me you've got enough on the table right now, or if you've got a little more room, then that's fine. But I think that's something that we have to know. And we don't want to overload things to the point where we're not being successful on all the other things that you're doing. Like, for example, I see a lot of successes in good neighbor policy and getting this kind of work out. And I've been in your shoes on a smaller basis, but you can get pretty busy sometimes with a lot of people tugging on your sleeve. So again, I want to reiterate, we need to be helpful and we need to be focused. And once we get a shopping list, maybe there are items that people on this group are much more near and dear to their heart. Then we look at them and say, these are areas where we co-align on what we're trying to get done, and we could be helpful. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's how I see it. So
I really appreciate the sensitivity to the stretch moment that many agencies in particular are experiencing, and that. But I just want to say, we're not scared. We acknowledge that this is a unique time, and that there are a unique array of resources available, and we're going to respond and continue to take risk, managed, but take risk nonetheless. So as I'm thinking about this question, back to Commissioner Shattuck McNally's point, is that we could work something up, and it would not just be the State Forest Service. We would do this in partnership with CFRI and a lot of our other key NGO partners that are very deeply invested in this, in the reforestation pipeline itself. And so I was looking at the proposed agenda for this Southwest Reforestation Partnership concept. They're focusing on research, seed nursery, outplanting, and post-planting, education, seed nursery, outplanting, and post-planting, and then operations. And that involves adaptive learning and management, critical research needs for long-term success, education, both professional, academic, as well as capacity and skill building, and then operations. They're focused on logistics and sort of the business and economics. And so, again, I think they have a good framework we could potentially borrow from if the goal was to advance some policy formulation that would hit on all three of those concepts, which very much, align with some of the conversation that we've been having this morning. We could fuse some of this initiative that's already in place with some of the advocacy and resources that this group is proposing, and we would build out around it. Because again, we're going to be pursuing this concept either way in partnership with those exact same folks. I think it would be fantastic and a step in the right direction for state policy and for this group to be aligned with those efforts from the get-go. So we just might need some additional offline conversation to rough in what that might look like. But I could commit in the next week or so to propose something back to this group that would be a little bit, more have some thought put behind it and have some other expertise brought in to help shape something for you to respond to. And if it's something the group likes, then it's something we could take to the full council.
I like that idea. Julie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, as you were talking, Director McCombs, one of the thoughts that just popped into my mind that I needed to get out before I lose it, you know, as you're thinking about policy and you're thinking about, you know, how does all this really get done? I was thinking about, you know, permit holders, right? Who the state is working with and giving access to, and sometimes that's utilities and others, right? And we have folks on the lands, you know, very likely qualified people who are out there doing other work who, as part of their scope, right, and as part of the trade-off for the permissions to be on the land, maybe part of the terms and conditions of that start to include something along the lines of cone collection or something else that's also helpful to the state land. So you know, maybe somebody would be kicking me in the shins, you know, suggesting that, but it just strikes me that we're there and we're looking for ways to partner and benefit and, you know, and advanced forest health for the benefit of all users of the land. So just wanted to throw that out there as, you know, food for thought as things are moving forward on, you know, is that a permit condition? Is it a policy? Who knows? I don't know, but it was just my thought. So I wanted to share it.
No, I think that's an excellent, another great suggestion. So just in interest of time, because we're running out of time, and I know we only said an hour, and I know I don't know about you, but I'm pretty much back to back today, and so yeah, it's just that I know we have so many things we want to tackle. There's a couple things in the chat. I know Samantha Albert had talked about as property owners collect their pine cones for pickup or something like that. I think that's part of, I don't know where Director McCombs, I mean, just add that to the list of a question. I just want to kind of keep moving on. Also, I think, Angela, you're right. Is the committee opening up to meet next Thursday to review what Director McCombs Matt comes up? And just on this question, I think certainly, I think we're close to having some kind of something so that when they come through this work that they're already doing, that we can craft something to kind of go forward. And granted, it doesn't have to be like the full legislative concept. It just be, you know, like before we had the workforce development thing and we had kind of an idea we wanted to expand these programs, and then it kind of developed over the next few months. So I think it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be kind of that main idea and where we think where the problem is. Here's a solution, and then we can work on, you know, refining it as we go forward. So my recommendation, because we've had some really great discussion, and I know we have some other ideas, is to put this as a potential directive and or legislative idea item. And then if everyone could even meet for 15, 20, 30 minutes on Thursday. I will be in the National Association of Counties presenting on wildfire resilience or natural disaster resiliency. But I will jump out. I can jump out and attend. I'll just leave my sessions and come. I'll have better internet there than I have here. So I'm willing to do that. I don't know if anyone, at least just for a moment, could jump out and we could have a quorum. So what are your thoughts on that? Can we move forward so we have, can move some other ideas today? Can I have a motion to kind of give that direction, Director McCombs? Is that enough time, or?
Yeah, I mean, coincidentally, I'll be on the Yellowstone River on Thursday, but that's okay. But James can report back out. What we'll do is try to group up really quick with Hallie and Maren and some of the folks in American Forest, some of the folks that we're talking to, and see if they can't help us, and then some internal staff help us rough out what a concept of how we might be able to frame up a reforestation pipeline bill or initiative, and then we'll get it back to you for review. We'll try to keep it high level and focused on those core issues around capacity and such.
Okay, so I see a lot of people saying Thursday's maybe not a good thing. So let us
Jody,
work out.
you could technically vote on this. I know it's like a little unorthodox, but you could vote on this in the full council meeting on the 27th.
Could we have a
just
meeting?
before
Yeah,
you
could we have a
present your
meeting
final
before the meeting?
recommendations.
Yeah, could we have a meeting before the meeting?
Well, no. So basically, Courtney and I really wanted to get the full recommendations to the full council next Thursday, a week before the full
Yeah.
council meeting, right? So really, it's ideal to decide this before then. But we could send out a doodle, and if people are available Wednesday, perhaps, or something,
Yeah.
it could work.
Okay, let's try it. Okay.
Okay.
So can I have a motion just for us to take all that we just discussed, this whole concept, moving for us to have, send out a poll and trying to have a discussion on this particular item for next week before we send this to the full council. I know that's a big nebulous motion, but move this idea forward till next week to bring in some kind of concept to vote on for the full council. How's that?
I would so move.
I'll second. It's Christie.
Awesome. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye or raise their hand. Aye.
I
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, let's move on. Thank you all. This has been a great discussion, and Director McCombs, as always, thanks for your expertise, professionalism, and your willingness to kind of go with how we're kind of moving here. So appreciate it, especially, and I'm jealous you're gonna be on the Yellowstone River.
These are fun meetings, by the way. I really like this group. You guys want to just get to it, and that's what I like to get to.
I will trade Yellowstone River for 110 degrees in Austin next week in a heartbeat. So, but I'm leaving, I'm staying in the air conditioning the whole time. So let's move on. There was one other item, Courtney, that I think we had moved to the list quick. And I'm sorry, my head's full of seats right now. So.
No, that's fine. Yeah, the other item was pretty broad. It was boots on the ground is what I have from the notes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I have a
Yeah, the
child
two items were seed collection and boots on the ground.
Okay, and then the other thing, okay, so boots on the ground is the capacity issue. So can we bring up that old list of priorities or things that we have discussed before? I think that's where that's all at.
Yes. So I can share. These are the meeting minutes from our February full council meeting. And here we have the top three and then the following three priorities that the full council voted on. So this might be useful just to keep in mind. And let me make
Courtney,
it
can you
bigger.
vote or Zoom to 175 or something? Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Jody, I do think it's important to note here, capacity actually isn't really on this list. But again, these were the priorities of the full council to learn about, to move forward on in 2023.
So I think it's interesting, number 4, it's kind of that forest health and climate. We're kind of covering that sort of. So Director McCombs, boots on the ground, that's capacity. What have we done the last few years? You mentioned something that funding some of these capacity issues or things worked or were successful. Which ones were you talking about?
So I think the biggest success we've had to date is the Good Neighbor Authority agreements that we've been able to establish. You know, we got $2 million from the U.S. Forest Service to what we're calling the surge proposal, which is adding capacity in these areas where we have the highest priorities for work. They are and then the governor came over the top and asked for $2 million in his budget, which was as part of the wildfire package last year, which was actually one of the, I think, the only things picked up in the package to move through JVC. And so we had those funds. We are in direct negotiations right now with the Rocky Mountain region for an additional $2 to $3 million in G&A. And every time that we leverage that, it just sends a really positive signal to the federal government that the state of Colorado is interested in bringing resources alongside federal resources. And so that G&A infusion is probably the most straightforward and effective mechanism for us to bring foresters and put them on the ground in places where we have the highest priority for work. So that's money that we can continue to grow and leverage with federal support and translate explicitly into bodies on the ground doing cross-boundary treatment planning and implementation.
Anytime the state puts up funds, that is a neon sign to the feds that they're serious and they're going to do the work. So any way that we can get funding, put funding in the hands of the state to do this work, then you capture that much more federal money. And if you watch how California ends up with all the money, they and locally within the state even, but it's money tends to follow the money. And in this particular case, if we're going to spend federal money, we want to bring it home to Colorado. And that Good Neighbor Authority is huge. And continued funding, expanding of funding for that from an industry side, continued funding, expanding funding, and developing a workforce to implement it with are the industry views that we feel are important. And so I'll do anything I can to load that gun for you, Director McCombs, anything. But that's where we feel it happens.
So so this is my idea. How about we continue? How about we make that recommendation that we ask the state to continue to fund the Good Neighbor Authority and expand it and send a signal to that we're committed to this work so we can leverage those funds. Because that was something also we talked about. How do we leverage federal funds and make sure that we're taking advantage of that? And I think so this is a kind of a win-win. So I would make that my recommendation that we send a signal. We want to put expand, amplify, continue all of the above of this Good Neighbor Authority and put is $1 million, let's just say $1.5 million. Is that too much to ask for, Director McCombs?
No, we're negotiating for 2 to 3 right now with the feds, and anything that we show, even in discussion, advance of the legislature is going to be valuable to that conversation. The piece of the capacity that I want to make sure we capture ties back to the presentation that Katie gave, and that is there's a deep need for the biggest signal that we got in the survey of collaboratives and communities across the state was a deficit in capacity for planning. To Mark's point, the communities that can invest in facilitation and invest in collaborative capacity are the ones that ultimately get more work done. They're able to move planning faster, and they can draw down additional resources. So that the governor's budget included $1 million for capacity in Furworm last year that didn't make it through the legislative process. But I do think there is still a quantified and real need for additional capacity funds in Furworm to be able to go to communities that don't have the same resources as others to be able to develop that social license that's needed to act at the scale of the problem. So that's there's the 2 capacity pieces, are boots on the ground, and then having that collaborative capacity in communities in Colorado that don't currently have that bandwidth. And that creates a lot of barriers as it relates to NEPA, as it relates to some of the social support for broad scale forest management action. Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, by what you were saying, Director McCombs, that seems to hit the number 1 priority that's on this list here. I mean, that's the barrier to the landscape scale work. So it seems like we'd be hitting that if we were raising something up.
Yeah, and I think some of the data that Center for Collaborative Conservation has brought is actually really helpful. Some of the pushback we got at JBC last year was there just wasn't a lot of quantified need as it relates to collaborative capacity. And I think what Katie and CCC is doing is helping sharpen that narrative, and we could potentially be more convincing this year, especially if this body was behind that kind of investment.
Okay, so is that 1 bill or 2 bills? Or a combined bill for maximum impact?
James, our resident policy expert here.
How about we say this? How about we
Sorry, I
talk
was
about?
on mute for a while. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
Go ahead,
James.
Commissioner.
No, I'm just saying,
Oh.
maybe it needs to be, we to present both ideas and suggest that, both be moved as policy and whether I don't know. What do you think, James?
I think it's cleaner to do separate bills, just because in the sense, if there's some good legislation packed in one kind of omnibus bill, and for some reason the legislature comes to an understanding that maybe they don't like piece A, rather than losing a whole bill, we have an opportunity to get two different bills across. And if they're like, we have the funding for X, but not necessarily for this one, then it's just a loss of one bill than going through the work to kind of amend until it's something acceptable. That would be my recommendation, is to as many bills as it needs to, just so we have the opportunity to not combine and lose multiple things in one time.
Thank you, James. So how about, we have two ideas because we're running out of time and I have one other idea. So first, $1.5 million to expand, continue Good Neighbor Authority. Is that one? And two, since it didn't happen, $1 million for fur worm and those other to help reduce the barriers for these smaller counties and areas that are having trouble getting capacity issues. So two bills. Anybody have any, we can refine these going forward, but we need to kind of get through these ideas so that we can get those fine tuned for next week. Any major concerns?
Yeah, it's Christy. Do we want to attach numbers right now, or do we want to just leave not have a number attached? I don't want to limit ourselves to just those numbers unless we think those are high.
No, I think that they're reflective of what was been in the past, if I'm correct. That was asked for before. Was fur worm $1 million that didn't make it out last time? Yes, he's nodding yes. So, and they can always be adjusted as we go forward with stakeholdering.
Okay, thank you.
So I would welcome a motion, unless someone has some really concerns. I think this addresses our capacity issue for right now. To put both of those bill ideas on the list for forwarding to the Full Force Health Council for recommendation.
I would so move.
I would second.
Okay, any further discussion or concerns? Okay, all those
Only
in
one.
favor? Oh,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Only one, as to Christie's point about the putting price tags on them. I hate to use past historical references as a starting point for dollar amounts for anything. Sit down and assess the need, and is the need greater, or let's get what it takes to get the job done, whether it's less or more, rather than necessarily saying that. I realize there's a political reality that we didn't get this last year at this price, but I'm a little bit concerned with that being the dominant method in how we figure out what we need to fund these programs at. I would prefer to look at the need and then say, I realize it's very common in government. Well, we're up 5% or down 10% from last year. Well, I'd like to look at the problem. And in some of these areas, so you could put a price tag on it or not. I'm fine with that. I'm just saying going forward, I prefer to look at the problem rather than historical precedent. That's my 2 cents worth, but I'm good to go with the bill as I seconded it.
Okay,
Or
I think as the stakeholdering goes forward, that number can be, as we make this recommendation, as it goes to the legislation, they can always adjust that looking at the budget going forward. But I feel like we have to kind of at least go with what was kind of the background, because I think those numbers were put after assessing the need, and weren't just kind of, pulled out of thin air. So I think this doesn't mean that's the final number. It's just at least to emphasize the scope or the need for these programs. So there's still a motion on the table. Anybody have concerns about the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any of those opposed? Okay. One other, I know we're out of time and I'm late for my other thing, so they're just gonna have to wait. But I have this thing. We've talked about, we did not bring anything on our list about moving biomass. I've been hearing a lot about this. There's a lot of biomass on the ground. We're having mitigation efforts and then we have all these piles and it's not moving. And we haven't really even fully addressed that. Or we've had some conversations and I know, you know, that's an ongoing need. So my idea, just to bring the awareness and maybe have the awareness, just to kind of get folks understanding the need and maybe putting on the gap there of how we move this. I know Jefferson County has 2 mitigation days where they pay for dumpsters that go out into these neighborhoods and folks mitigate their properties, or there's a project, and then either an air curtain burner or a dumpster collects all this biomass and someone comes and moves it. And it's a certain day where everyone knows ahead of time. And it's an awareness day. I'm talking about being FireWise. And my idea was to pilot through certain high-risk counties, just so we to know the scope and how much we need, is maybe 10, maybe 12 counties. I don't know, this would have to be developed, having a statewide mitigation day, raising awareness, and then finding the funding to supply that gap of dumpsters or whatever to move that ground, that biomass off and into appropriate spots, whether it's to the cross-laminated timber, to a biochar, or to organizations like Mr. Morgan's. What do you think about that idea to ask for a statewide mitigation day to pilot, to see what we could do to kind of help these neighborhoods by providing, because it costs money to do that, to kind of pilot how that might work, and maybe spark kind of an annual awareness day for the forest, for forest health in general. And I know it's kind of last minute, but I was just thinking about this as I was traveling through all those forests in other counties last week and having some conversations with folks in this space. So I know it's just a concept, and you know it's a great answer, but I think we still haven't dealt with that biomass issue. Thoughts? Julie?
And I don't see the list anymore, but I felt like there was something on the list about communication and, you know, sort of getting the word out. So that could be a proposal that combines both the woody mass priority and the, you know, how do you get the word out? How do you educate people about various things? I may have the education one not quite right, but I guess in short, my answer is yes. I think it doesn't hurt to put it on the list, and let's see if the council sees that has some legs. I think getting people talking about what does it take and how can everyone help, that's never a bad idea.
I think that's 5 and 6. Katie has her hand raised.
Hi. I don't know if this is a different thing than what you're talking about, but while you were talking, I remembered there's this organization called Saluting Branches. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's basically one day a year. They solicit all these different urban forestry companies to come together and donate their services and their equipment to clean up veterans cemeteries. And I wonder if this could be a similar model to what they do, where it's like this big volunteer event where the people that already have the equipment come together. Is that kind of, am I just repeating what you're saying, or is this a tangent? I'm not sure.
I think it's similar concept, Katie, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I know that kind of do this in Jefferson County, where they kind of provide the, you know, in certain strategic areas. And I actually know exactly where the strategic areas are in my county, because that's where the pinch points are, where they can't get the mass moved off the area. So I think that's great. I think it's very relevant and kind of a good, I think you're right, kind of incentivizing or helping those partners come and help move the mass. So Mr. Morgan, your hand's raised. Thank you, Katie, for that thought.
Try to keep this real short. This is something that I have dealt with for a long time. And these kind of projects, if you can generate interest or knowledge or education, I would be very positive about that. As far generally, as far as actually affecting on the ground the economy of scale that you need, they tend to be very ineffective things, you know, and so I guess I would question very carefully the dollars that you would spend to do that versus the public support. I would view it almost as an advertising campaign. If it's an advertising campaign for the business of Forest Health that we're in, then I think it would be positive. As far as the actually affecting on the ground, I think it would be very difficult to be very effective. And so, so then there's a trade-off of dollars. What could we do to be more effective with those dollars? And my last comment is being somewhat of a fiscal conservative. A lot of the slash is generated on small properties up in the mountains, and those people move there and they live there by choice. And so I kind of put their forestry as that's their fiscal responsibility for where they choose to live. And I'm very supportive of managing state and federal grounds surrounding those properties, but the actual slash and stuff generated on their properties, I kind of question why a kid working for minimum wage and paying taxes and living in an apartment in Aurora should be funding doing slash work on mountain properties. And so you got it all there, my conservative views and my financial views, but I really have a question with that, and limited resources over unlimited wants. I mean, I try never to hide an agenda. I would like to work on projects of bigger scales with better results and put funds in them to get them. But I do not want to be negative about building public support. And I'm not the advertising specialist. So if you feel there's an advertising value there to grow the program and grow interest, I'm all for it. I don't think you'll affect the landscape very much. You might affect a lot of minds and then affect the landscape.
No, I hear you, Mr. Morgan, and I think it's kind of both things. And also I think it gets the property owners doing the work where they have to kind of get out and clear their stuff, and then we would just help move it and help kind of, I don't know. It's just an idea. But Julie, your hand was raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think as the idea develops, it could be something where there aren't a lot of dollars really put toward it, really, other than the communication costs themselves, but then getting people to voluntarily, participate. I think Katie was talking about, folks with the equipment and the businesses, volunteering their time, their equipment, etc. I could see where it could be a very low cost opportunity to just get people thinking about it and thinking about how to clean up their properties and be, frankly, fire smart and start a bigger conversation around it.
So something that, again, just these are concepts, we don't have to have them fully vetted out, but just an idea, because we haven't really talked about how we still have this big, huge, in my opinion, how this gap that we have of how to get this woody biomass to the appropriate, off the landscape and into the appropriate spots. So, Mr. Morgan, do you still have your hand raised?
No, I'm technically incompetent here, so I'll see if I can get rid of it.
Just want to make sure. So that would be my last idea, and I know we're over time for all of us. Anybody want to at least put this on the list for a discussion, because maybe the full council won't like it and vote it down anyway. That's the whole thing. This whole list might get all voted down anyway. We don't know. So at least, what do you think about at least putting it on the list? And I'll try to formulate a little bit better with some ideas and just awareness. And I appreciate, Courtney, you bringing up that list. I know I threw you a curveball, but I think that kind of addresses the 5 and 6 from our last priority list. So a little bit, not a lot, just a little. So, and I think leveraging resources group has been working very hard and has a nice education piece too that they have. So We're out of time. I welcome a motion if anyone thinks this is worth advancing and voting on at least. I'm not sure where it will go, but I thought at least we can keep the biomass conversation going.
I'd be fine with moving to do that.
Is there a second?
Julie was second.
Okay, do we still have enough for quorum, Courtney? I guess we're technically,
I think Christy sent an email that Katie just put in the chat that's worth viewing. I don't know, Courtney, do we still have quorum with Christy absent?
So we do not have quorum anymore, but I don't believe quorum can be broken when people
Okay.
leave.
Copy.
There is some point when if there's only 2 people left, I'm not
Right.
sure.
okay, so let's move on so we can get everyone back to their other things, and Director Combs needs to get outside and plant trees in Crested Butte. So we have a motion and a second, I believe, on the table, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you. How do you feel? I hope everyone feels good about what we have on the list. We're tackling very complex and complicated and critical issues. And I just appreciate the conversation, and you guys really stick in the conversation and hang in there. And I think, Courtney, I know that's a lot we just threw at you. And I'm sure if everyone can be responsive to whatever list she sends out, I'm sure she'll send out kind of a rough draft of what we just kind of threw on there. This will also be kind of the conversation that goes in our final report. And so that also I feel was important to get on there so that it's in our for the annual report that we're still talking about this, if that makes sense. And then if we can be really quickly responsive to the doodle poll for Courtney and everyone, so we can quickly formulate when we can have a quick meeting to finally vote on that other piece. Does that sound like a plan, team? Cool. Okay. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, James. Thank you, Director McCombs. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Mark. Everyone, just have a great day. And I'm going to do my CCI legislative. I'm going to now talk about other legislative priorities with another group. And then I'm going to go see some baby bison. So I will see you all later. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Aye.
Bye, James.